So, you want to be a contractor. Ever wonder what it takes to become a contractor? The journey they go on to get where they are now, or the crazy things they see and hear on the job site? Well, you're in the right spot. Welcome to So You Want to Be a Contractor, the podcast. Join your host, Mike Fisher, as he talks to owners of construction companies from all over about how they got started, how they run their business, and some of the craziest stories they've experienced on their job sites. And now, your host, Mike Fisher.
Welcome to So You Want to Be a Contractor. This is episode number 39. My name is Mike Fisher. My co-host over there on the road, Maricela Arechiga. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm having to improvise. Anyone who's in the industry knows sometimes you got to get in your truck and get somewhere by a certain hour. And I'm not good with not keeping my word. So I just made sure that I did the podcast from the road.
She's got a driver, folks. She's got a driver. We're being safe. Everything's okay. And our guest today, Jeff Forrest, president at WPC out in Florida. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm awesome, man. Yes, enjoying the Florida weather still as we enter November, and we still get this wonderful weather. We used to call this timeshare weather because all the timeshare salesmen would say it's just like this every day.
It's just like, tell me what part of Florida you're in.
Until July when it's humid.
Yeah.
Exactly. Maricela, I'm in kind of Orlando, Florida proper, so almost dead center in the state.
Okay. Would you say that Florida has better weather, or Los Angeles or Southern California has better weather?
Wow. So that's a really good question. Being that I'm from Southern California, having been born in Westminster, right outside of Disneyland, I'm going to go with Southern California weather because I'm still a huge fan of being in that part of the world. And we just had a massive hurricane go through the center of Florida here, so I'll go with Southern California weather.
Yeah, it's raining in Southern California today. So
I was going to say, can you see how dark it is in my house right now? I'm trying to turn lights on.
That doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen very often, and everyone's lost their mind this morning. You should see what traffic. We just don't know what to do with weather around here if it's not sun.
That's funny. Well,
Jeff, tell us what you do. Tell us who you are. What do you do? I hear that you started off in Southern California. You're in Florida now. Plug.
So let me tell you how we got to where we're here. So my dad was a superintendent at Disneyland, and so he worked for a company called Buena Vista Construction, which was the construction company for Disney. Yeah. And in 1967 was transferred from Orange County, California to Orange County, Florida.
Wow.
And so I was 4 at the time, and my dad was a superintendent both on Main Street at Disney World and in Frontierland at Disney World. So that's kind of how we got from Southern California. So we're Disneyland brats and Disney World brats. It's in the DNA.
Have you counted how many times? Can you count how many times you've visited one of the parks? Like, is that even achievable? I mean, I'm just imagining that you've been there countless times. Like, do you...
Yeah, so my California friends are gonna, if they see this, they're gonna give me a lot of trouble because I have absolutely never once been to Disneyland. Now, yeah. So,
wait,
and by the way, I have
dad
friends that
there?
go all the time. I have friends that go all the time. Yeah. I've never once been to Disneyland. So
wait, not once, not even as a child. When your dad worked there, did he say, "Hey,
if I did, it was that pre-memory.
Yeah.
It was that pre-memory thing. And I was 4 years old when I moved here, so I have very few recollections.
So ironic because we literally yesterday, Maricela and I were talking, and because that's what we do. We just chat, we hang out, and she was talking about how much she loves Disneyland and can't wait to go back.
No, listen, the true. Thanks for outing me, Mike. Thanks for outing me.
If anyone from Disney is listening, fuck, I'll take it. That's great. I'm happy.
The truth.
But to answer your question, Maricela, Disney World. So I had a really interesting experience, and I'll get to how I got into this business. Okay. By the way, my dad, and my brother, and all that other stuff in a second. So Disneyland and Disney World. We come here. My dad's a superintendent, and I'll sneak a little bit into the middle of the conversation here. When I was 18 years old, my dad, first of all, didn't want me to be in the construction business. Already been doing it for 3 years, working and getting paid weekends and summers while I was going to school. And so, but my dad goes, I don't want you to be in the construction business. He was a blue collar worker, nail banger, as was my brother early in his career. And so he goes, you got to go to work at Disney. You got to learn what it's like to be in customer service. I want you to be a computer programmer anyways, all this other kind of fun stuff. So he made me get a job at Disney World, which I did what they call a swing shift. So I had this 6 p.m. to midnight shift. I would work during the day, and then I would go work at night at Disney for this little 2.5 month stint. And so I actually got to be, I got to drink the Kool-Aid and understand what the service. And more importantly, I worked in security, and I got to see all the back of the house stuff. So none of that has to do with construction, by the way, but it is a part of my career that the only other place I ever worked in my entire life, other than this company, was 2.5 months at Disney, and I did it at the same time I was working here. So.
Whoa, that's impressive. So the only other job that you've had outside of the career that you've built is at Disney World.
Correct.
Wow.
And so I like to say that I started to get paid by my brother. My brother started the company, WPC, known as Winter Park Construction, in the early stages of the company, and then ultimately became WPC in about 1981. So I went to work for my brother in 1979. Where he actually started paying me. Prior to that, I would go to the job sites and he wouldn't pay me. But so I came out
because your brother's smart. It sounds like your brother's smart, opportunist.
My brother was a Type A entrepreneur, and there's a little bit more to the story about that.
I assume he's older though.
With that said,
I assume he's older.
My brother's 13 years older than I was. Yeah,
so he'd been around the block a little bit.
Yeah, he'd been around. He failed a couple of times. This was his fourth company. By the way, at a very young age that he started. That actually was successful, and the company's 48 years old now. So, but I went to work at 15. Worked at high school over the summers. High school was not my favorite thing to do, and it wasn't that. It's that I'm dyslexic, and so anybody that has dyslexia understands that reading and all the other stuff, depending on how far you are on the spectrum, is not our favorite thing. And so I could not wait to get out of high school. And I was in 1979. I was 15 years old, making $5 an hour. And, that's big money back in those days. Neither one of you know what that is. But,
I do.
But it was fun.
Listen, minimum wage back in my day, Jeff, was $4.25. I remember those days. So I have a hard.
It was $3.25, I think, when I was back there. So I was making big money.
So Jeff, tell us what you guys do. What does WPC do?
Fair enough. The company is best known as a multi-unit builder, which means we got into in Central Florida building hospitality. The timeshare, as I mentioned earlier, was kind of our initial entry into building multiple units at a time. And in the case of our beginnings, we went to work for Holiday Inn Club Vacations, which was founded by Kemmons Wilson, who founded Holiday Inns. And so he hired my brother and myself and the rest of our team to work on his project. And what that did was it progressed to senior living, multifamily, a lot of multifamily these days. It's as much as the same in California. And then senior housing. And so anything that's got more than one unit to it, that, by the way, is not a primary resident for sale product, which means a condominium or that kind of thing. So we do much multifamily work, a lot of hotels, senior housing, which is memory care, assisted living, et cetera, and student housing. So, but Central Florida is the timeshare capital of the world.
Yeah.
And so we were really blessed to be in that hospitality market for so long.
How much did the company start there? And how, I mean, it sounds like that's where you guys are at. Is that where he was targeting all along? Is that was intention? I'm going to build you said he had 4 other attempts. Did he know that this was the market he wanted to serve?
So I think that the way that my brother thought as an entrepreneur was, you look for a business where you can gain traction and that your skill set fits. And so my brother did a lot of interesting things when he was a young man, including, by the way, hitchhiking from California to Florida at 17 years old.
God.
It took him 12 months to do that. We could have a whole podcast on my brother, by the way. Because such an interesting dude, and I keep saying in past tense. He passed away 2 years ago.
Oh, sorry. Man.
So
wow.
So the interesting part about my brother was just that he just never gave up, and so he was an engineer, had an engineer's brain, and finally ended is doing framing. And so we were framing carpenters, and we got into that business, and eventually were hired to do the framing at this particular resort that we started with. And then the general contractor that hired us said he wanted to go back to Sarasota. He introduced us as the general contractor, and that was in 1981. I had just graduated high school in 1981, and I was out on the job site pounding nails and running jobs. So it was fun.
That's wild.
Wow.
What was your journey like from pounding nails out of high school to the presidency and that time span and all the jobs in between, and what did you do from a role standpoint? How much have you done there?
And answer that in 60 seconds, please.
Yeah, right.
That's
60 seconds.
That's a lifetime. That's a lifetime.
So this is my 43rd. This is my 43rd year of doing this stuff, and so in 60 seconds, I will tell you that I was a laborer, I was a carpenter's helper, I was a carpenter, I was a superintendent, I became an assistant project manager, and because I never shut my mouth, my brother said, "You're gonna be our salesman and our marketing," and then so I focused on branding and marketing of the company and worked my way. I had the right last name. I didn't have it. That's how I got the job. It's not how I kept it. But my brother always kind of fit me into these categories of what was best suited for the company. And in 2007, I bought a majority of the company along with a few other partners from my brother. So he became my minority partner. Was that
a willing sale? Or was that
It was, yeah. Okay. Actually, he'd been working on that for about 5 years.
So it was part of
once he told me. That was his succession plan. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So he had other businesses that he wanted to start. So we wanted to get out of the day-to-day of running a construction company. Mm-hmm. And beyond 2007, until the day he died, he was still starting other businesses. It was such a great story. Such a great story. Yeah.
So Jeff, you have nearly probably worn all the hats of a construction business, right? Like from the laborer all the way up to sales, marketing, PMing, all of it. I know how much that I can imagine how much that really benefited you, and it benefits you to the date in terms of your leadership and looking down. But tell us in what ways you think that hurt you, having had all the roles. Do you think that there was some parts there that really prevented you from pulling certain levels or taking certain risks?
That's a really interesting question. And so I never thought of it. I always thought at every step that I was blessed to be able to do was a benefit to the ability to manage not only a business, right? Because that's the business. There's the business of contracting, and then there's the general contracting piece, which is the building of things. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that and that's why I believe this business is so important, that the field-based experiences that you have are so critical to being able to really be successful as a general contractor. Not only do you have to do it because you have to know what you're doing, mm-hmm. but the reality is being out there and understanding the fact, and by the way, in Florida, waking up at 5:30 in the morning, which I still do, understanding that you're going to be going out and working in humidity that can be 98% in the middle of the summer. And people do this day in and day out. The idea that I'm empathetic to all of those kind of roles, I think really had added that value. If there was a deterrent to any of it, I'm a look forward person. I never really looked back at any of those kinds of things. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. I might pop one out before the podcast.
I'll share one that I experienced having done. I'm not a hammer to nail person in my business, but I've done a lot in terms of the business end of it. I've carried a lot of the roles, right? I think for me, it's at least in crossing that bridge from doing the work yourself to being in a leadership, CEO, COO, whatever it is. It's a really big shift going from tactical to strategical to like visionary. Right? Like you stay stuck in the tactical when you're really at the bottom level of your company, right? Doing all the things, putting a hammer to a nail. That's a really big leap when you go from tactical to visionary. And a lot of times I found myself stuck with like just thinking about what are the things I have to do, because that's what you do at that labor level, right? Like, what do I have to do today? How do I get it done? Check, check, check. But that's not what creates the vision for the business. I'll say that that's one of my struggles.
Moving from that day-to-day mindset to the long-term mindset, or what is the phrase? Working on the business rather than in the business, getting out of that mindset.
Yeah.
Right on. And by the way, we use that conversation around here all the time. I will say that, let me tell you what I think the detriment was, that, and this is self-awareness, right? So I work in a family company. At one time, not only did my dad work here, my brother and myself, my niece was in this, and my son now is getting ready to be the managing partner of this company.
That's
the detriment cool. that what I didn't recognize early enough is that I will always be the little brother. And so, when you have a founder that's got that strong personality, and I 13 years younger, I was always smarter than my brother. At least I thought I was. and in the moment that I accepted this relationship piece where he was always going to be there as my guide, the moment I accepted that, it was like, holy crap, now I get to do this thing, right? And so I will tell you that up to the point where he passed away, I always had my safety net. I always was there. He was always there. He was always my sounding board, even when he didn't show up at the office on a regular basis because he was off doing his other things. But the moment he died, it was like, oh, crap. I have no more safety net. That idea of taking risk, the idea of you're it, right?
Yeah, and you're swimming without floaties. You're swimming without floaties.
Right. But remembering that was my perspective and not everybody else in the company. So I have at one time, we had 165 people working here prior to the downturn in 2010. But everybody else looked at me as the leader of this company, as the natural leader of this company, because I grew up. I always looked at myself as the little brother. And so the thing about a family company, to kind of get to the point here, is that you'll always be the family, and you always have to respect that relationship. And when you accept it and not have the tension associated with it that brothers have, it became such a better place, not only for me to work, but I think for my brother to work and live in and survive until he did. So it was really interesting.
How did you do that?
And by the way,
how did you do that? Because that's very, that's idealistic, but you probably had to hit some bumps in the road to like understand what those boundaries are, what those rules of engagement were, right? And I'm asking that because that's an important piece. There's a lot of construction businesses that are family owned and operated. I am in one myself. And so it took a lot of fighting to figure out what those rules of engagement were for us. What do they look like for you?
Well, prior to me kind of having this acceptance, it's almost like no matter what my brother would recommend, I was going to push against it. Because it was just the thing to do, right? After the point at which and by the way, it was an epiphany, because when my son started working here, now 9.5 years ago for his second time, a whole nother story about my son. He was, by the way, started to work at 15 years old, went to college, dropped out of college, played professional poker for 5 years, decided to come back and gamble in the construction business.
Holy heck.
What the fuck?
But when he, yeah, great story though. I love it. But when my brother came back here, when my son came back to go to work and decided this was the career he wanted to do, I started to recognize that I now had to treat him the way that I wanted my brother to treat me all those years.
Oh, you learned.
And so that was the point at which it was like, you know what? I have to not, otherwise I would have had that same tension. My son's far smarter than I am. And I mean that literally. His IQ is much higher than mine. But what that meant is I had to have a higher emotional kind of IQ associated with the relationship, because he was the natural leader in this company. Everybody started to recognize that. And so I had to treat my brother differently so that I wouldn't repeat some of what I would consider my faults associated with the relationship with my brother.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, Jeff, is that the relationship between brothers had to be left out of the business, and you guys had to be business partners. You guys had peers. Like, you don't treat, I say this to Mario, my husband, who I'm in business with, like, would you talk to a partner this way, a peer this way? And I'm the same way.
The answer is yes. No,
Well, we got a second co-host over there.
Is that
we got
your driver?
co-host.
Is that your driver?
Yeah. You leave yourself out of this, mister. You leave yourself out of this. But
Maricela, you're exactly right. You're exactly right, because what we decided to do and what we were able to do, and by the way, this was only at the end of this kind of experience, having worked together for 41 years. What we decided to do is we were going to be brothers when we were away from the business, and we were going to be partners when we were in the business. And not only that, he said, you know what, this isn't my company anymore. This is yours. Now, I may not have observed that until he passed away, but the reality was, for him, it was like, I made this decision because I felt you could do your job. Now just go do your job. And you know what? I look at every experience I've had as kind of the right path that I was supposed to take. And by the way, that includes the fact that I lost my brother. So it all works together. Now I got a wonderful son that's right behind me in the office right next door.
So there's going to be 3 generations of 4, because your dad, while he didn't have his own business, right? He worked for the Disney Corporation. Correct. This is 4 generations of Forrestmen in construction.
Yeah. Well, actually more than that, because my grandfather Felix was a carpenter as well. So there is this kind of DNA component associated with the fact that we were not smart enough to do anything else. So we're in the construction business.
I'd argue that just because, I mean, look, you're obviously pretty successful, right? I mean, you got to have some level of intelligence to be able to get where you are and last as long as you guys have, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a facetious comment in the sense that I do enjoy, by the way, more now at my position than I am here in the company than I really ever have, because everything up to leading to this point was more of kind of an experience that I was having to get me to here. Right. And so for me, the next part of my career is watching my son change the way this company will look for the next 50 years as we celebrate year number 49 in January.
So talk about that a little bit. You mentioned that you're happy and you're settled and this is an ideal spot for you, but what does your day-to-day look like? What is your role?
Tell us about your outfit.
Yeah, tell us about the outfit. By the way, if you saw the rest of me, this is the extent of the attire that we work on a regular basis. It's our golf shirts, my white tennis shoes and jeans, and you know, the culture here, to avoid answering your question right away, is one of we really do kind of enjoy the idea that we are a young company in attitude. And so, you know, I'd say 60% of the people that work at this company are 35 and younger.
Smart.
Can you tell? I mean,
awesome. It is. Yeah. I mean, my son is 34 years old. He's getting ready to. It was intentional beginning 7 years ago, because 7 years ago, this company had a medium age of 55 and higher. Oof. And so we, through a lot of help from other general contractors that were in a peer group, but they go, listen, man, you know, this company, in order to survive, is going to require an injection of youth. And so we intentionally began looking at younger and brighter, both internally and externally, individuals that would be able to take this company forward. I have project managers running $50 million worth of work that are 28 years old. And by the way, they're doing an amazing job doing it, right? And so my older self would have thought, nah, they're not experienced enough. I need somebody that's got a little bit more kind of seasoning to them. So really interesting change. But
that's a super interesting change, because that's really, really impressive. You have a 28-year-old that's managing $50 million worth of projects for your business and is doing a good job.
So what kind of things had to change, or what kind of things did change internally when you guys got younger? I have to imagine they didn't come into a business, you know, run and operated by, what did you say, median age of 55, and you get all these young people. And I can't imagine they just walked in and went, okay, yeah, we'll do business the same way, right? I have to imagine there was some pushback, there was some some visionary, some other things, some ideas that came from that injection of youth. And what did that look like? Have you adopted some of those things, or what changed, getting younger?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest challenge you have with a company that's as tenured as we are is that you do have a lot of people in the company that have been here a very long time, and that although their passion is still there, their energy levels and their day-to-day kind of ability to deal in this environment that's a pretty difficult environment, probably more difficult today than it may have ever been, it's challenging. So part of bringing youth into the company is making sure that you don't carry people that have been around maybe just a hair too long.
Ooh.
And most of them, by the way, it's just a matter of kind of recognizing it already. So this wasn't we were very empathetic about how we were going to manage this kind of long-term transition. So 7 years later, right, from its initial kind of thought process, we were very conscious of how we were going to manage. And so, and it, of course, it had its challenges. But I think that to answer your question, Mike, the most important thing for a leader or somebody that's been around a while, and again, I mean, I just turned 59 years old, which really isn't that old. But it's my lens was the lens that I kind of have been looking through, through my career. What I had to be, in order for me to really change, I had to make sure that I was conscious of what my son's lens was, or my younger team was. And so I literally would look, and my son and I, by the way, literally best friends. I mean, it's a very, very unique experience.
Dang, Jeff, you're living the dream. You are living the dream.
Today, I'd say the answer to that question is absolutely yes. But so you have to be open to looking at different ways of leading, different ways of understanding how the youth. I don't get into this generational thing where we start categorizing millennials, et cetera. I just don't do that. My son would fit that category, and he would not. He would be in it generationally, but certainly not stereotypically. So it really is about kind of getting out of the way, listening, really understanding how people want to manage their day-to-day lives, and then blending that into a business that's been around forever, has a great deal of history, but I'm still learning how to do it.
What was the biggest thing you guys had to change? Be it an operation or a system or a mindset or a culture? What was the biggest thing you guys had to change through that transition process?
So I think the
most impactful change, maybe one of the two.
The most impactful change was giving the younger people a seat at the table, and then actually listening to them, right? It's not just about sitting there and letting them talk. It's going, okay, that's an interesting idea. Let's think about it. And so the giving them a seat at the table, had I done it 5 or 10 years sooner, would have been really a wonderful experience to have. But here's my definition of what I consider most people around here to have is a great deal of knowledge. And then us older guys and girls have the wisdom. And so knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing that it doesn't go into a fruit salad. So all I have to do is
oh my god! Oh my god!
Oh, that got me. That got me. That was a good one.
That took me a second to register that, but that's money. I'm absolutely taking that from you, Jeff.
100%.
Say that to my boys tonight.
I listen, it's not mine. I took that a long time ago. But what's interesting about the way, if you really kind of think about it, right? There are a lot of really smart people here that have different levels of experience over time. And so my job is not to give direction. It's to set direction. So the change, Mike, is about really how you kind of look at your responsibilities as a leader, and then recognizing that you have to keep learning all the time.
Keep learning.
And so, there are 2 books, both by the same author, that literally changed the way that I walked in the door every day. One is a book called Start With Why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by Simon Sinek. And if you haven't seen it or heard it or listened to it, I have to listen because my reading takes me like 4 times as long. So, and that book was a wonderful way of identifying why we are in this business and why we show up every day.
Yes.
And by the way, it's not about money.
Yes.
It's money is the result of what we do. So
That's
why are we
right.
doing it? That's number one. And number two is leaders eat last.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that book, which I just read a summer ago, maybe not even that long ago, changed the way I look at everybody in this company and how I look at my day-to-day operations. So,
Jeff, tell us about. Give me a picture. Paint me a picture of what the operations look like. I mean, how many? You said that before the Great Recession, you were over 150 employees. I heard you say.
Yeah, we had 165 in 2009,
Uh-huh.
and we had 65 in 2010.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's reflective of a lot of of a lot of businesses and what we had to do, right? Where are you guys now? How many projects are you running at one time, like in terms of employees? And are you mainly, do you sub out all of your work? Do you have in-house labor? Like what does your outfit look like? Give us some texture to that.
Sure. There's 85 people in this company.
Mm-hmm.
Of that, 30 of them are basically office-based people, whether that be administrators, estimators, accountants, etc. And then the balance of that group, a few of them kind of hybrid in and out of the office, but mostly based on jobs. We have 10 ground-up projects. And that's what our capability is. So based on our project manager group, which is 7 ground-up project managers, those 7 ground-up project managers are able to manage 10 ground-up jobs. Now, I say ground-up because I have a renovations division that has 23 projects going on right now all over the country. Wow. And that's a different kind of style. But our ground-up crew has 10 projects all within the state of Florida, from Jacksonville down to like Venice, Florida. There's kind of a line we draw that we don't go too much farther south.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what's the square radius that you're covering? Because that's, I mean, to stay in one, how much are you having to travel and go out to keep that and maintain that kind of business?
Yeah, so we kind of have a rule here that states that we're not going to get a project that's a ground-up project, by the way, that's more than about 3 hours away. Mm-hmm. The way that we're structured is we have 3 project executives. They're responsible for 7 project managers. Well, that's more because of the renovations group. And then there's multiple superintendents or superintendents. Mm-hmm. So if it's 3 hours away, when you wake up in the morning, you're not thinking, oh man, I got to drive to, in our case, like to Tallahassee, which is 4.5 hours. And you're going to spend the night overnight, or you're going to drive back 4.5 hours. So we really kind of put this little radius of about we're going to draw a circle. Of course, you only go left and right so far out of the center of the state. And the reason why we do that is because we want to be able to execute at the level that we're expected to execute at, which requires a great deal of oversight. I have singular projects that are $65 million. I've got to make sure that we can get to those jobs. By the way, not to see if they're doing it tactically or technically, to see if they're living up to the WPC brand. And that's our strategic advantage, is how do we provide a level of experience that's that much better than our competitors, not substantially better.
What is the WPC brand? And I love that you went there, because people don't buy, I forget the phrase, they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it and how you do it, right? Like you get to that level of professionalism of like, we don't do it like the way the industry standard is. We do it our way, and the way we do it brings so much success and so much, happy customers that we continue to grow. What is that thing that you do that is different? What is that WPC brand way of doing it?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question, because, when you look at building things, the sticks and bricks are typically the same. And by the way, there's wonderful general contractors here that we compete against when we do and associate with. And so oddly enough, if you go back to my conversation where I spent 2.5 months at Disney, and you think about customer service, the difference that we try to make on a day-to-day level with everybody that we touch is the interaction that we have with them. And so that thing that happens at Disney, by the way, that happens on our projects that we try to engage our entire staff in, is every time you're making a connection with somebody, no matter what it is, it's an opportunity to provide an experience that maybe they're not used to.
Oh, that's it.
And our industry is very stereotypical.
Yeah.
You know, we look at how much is it going to cost, how long is it going to take, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. We build things just like everybody else.
Yeah.
But the way that they feel about how we build them is the difference that we try to make. And so it's cliche and it sounds like it is what it is, but the reality is if you practice it all the time, it is. So I go to my job sites. When I do go to that job sites, I go on, I look at how does my sign look? Are there weeds around it? What does my trailer look like? What is the arrival experience going to be for not only the client that I'm building for, but anybody that drives by that site? And so those little things, those little touches, and I can tell you this without one hesitation, I never go to my job site to find out how well they're building anything. I never do that. I go to how does it look? How does my staff feel? Are they providing the experience for anybody that walks on that job site? And that's it.
I love that. That's almost the Disney mentality.
Serious.
It's almost why it's, as an adult, I can appreciate and I enjoy Disney, unlike somebody else. But it's not so much the rides or anything else, right? It's the fact that they are all about your experience. 100% of the reason why that they're there is your experience. And from waiting in lines to, moving around the park to just the way it looks, like you said, like from the trash or the weeds or the signs, or like it's an experience unlike anywhere else, especially in that amusement park space. So I don't know if you intentionally brought that or, from that Disney background that you and your dad had, but
that is really unique, and that is so special
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you think about what is the experience? What is the experience? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? And it's unique, Jeff, because it's freaking construction, and it's dirty and it's messy, and it's not anywhere, at least the process, it's not anywhere as pretty as the Disneyland image, right? But what is your customer, what is your client experience? What is your
I love that you have the mentality.
Experience?
Yeah, and I love that you have the mentality that you've passed along, that it's not about, what we do, it's how can we do it differently, right? Like everyone does the same thing. So rather than just doing it the same as everyone else and trying to do it better, faster, more efficient, cheaper, whatever, it's how can we change the experience around doing it? And that mentality, I think, is what makes you guys special, in my opinion.
That's a nugget.
Yeah, it's what we try to do. It's what we try to do. It really is. I mean, and we're not perfect at it by any means, but what you do is you just work at practicing it. And it's like building a muscle. And so somebody new, that's why most people the ones that are most successful in this company that move from a position of being our receptionist to being our administrative coordinator is because they recognize that they've got to kind of work towards this more about attitude and energy and how you treat people than it is about whether or not you're good at your job. We can teach you how to be good at your job. We just have to get you to be
the other things are choices that you have to make when you walk in the door and sit down at your desk every day or walk onto the job site.
Right on. And by the way, in 48 years of this company, we have executed horribly. And being able to go, you know what, we can't do 14 jobs, we can do 10 jobs.
Yes.
Because if we do 11, we're not going to execute at the level we should. Let's execute 10 as best we possibly can. And then if we get another project manager and superintendent, we'll add one. But that's the way we work here. It's about being disciplined about the non-negotiables, right?
Yeah, being disciplined about I'm going to pull two things out for anyone listening that I really feel like I'm just going to marinate on that are standing out is you have a brand. There's a way that WPC does it. And you've highlighted it, you've underlined it, and that's what you're selling. You're not just selling, this is how we're building, this is how we put, wood together. I'm selling you a process that is special to this business. It is part of our brand. And then that brand is what you've coined is I'm giving you an experience. I'm giving everyone that's a part of this process an experience. And that is very, very unique. And we all should be thinking about it in some kind of way. What is the experience? What is my brand in terms of executing that I'm giving to every single person that's a part of this process? Those are really good nuggets.
For sure. Are you guys still, from an operations standpoint, kind of going back to that a little bit, are you guys still doing the framing, or are there other trades you guys self-perform, or are there any?
Yeah, we never got to that.
Are there any that you guys self-perform?
No, we don't self-perform anything. We are basically managers, and we have a great subcontractor pool here that we have great relationships with, and some of these relationships go back almost 40 plus years. So we don't self-perform. We have wonderful project managers, project executives, superintendents, et cetera, and they kind of herd cats on the job site, right? So they get them all to line up. And one of the reasons we got into this production business is it's like manufacturing, except for the building stays still and the people move. And what we really got good at is how do we manage those people through each one of these units or hotel rooms or whatever it is that we're building in such an efficient way. And so again, you practice it. You never really get it. I always my one more nugget for you, Maricela, that you may or not have heard of is I have a sign on my office that says the road to success is always under construction. And so for us, it is about the fact that we will never reach the goal. We will. Simon Sinek says it's an infinite game. Yep. And it's never ending. So you're constantly
never arrive,
constantly
as
working
I've heard
hard.
it before.
Never arrive, right? Yeah. So
and then
my day to day. Yeah. My day to day, I get to walk into this office at whatever time I want to now, which is really nice. But I wake up every day. I wake up every day at about the same time. It's the internal clock that I've had since I was 15 years old. And then, I try not to jump on the phone, but I get moving, and I usually have a list of tasks that I'm working on. We are not just a general contractor anymore. We are also a developer. So I have 4 development projects that I'm involved in.
Jeff, you're taking me to where I wanted to go next. I want to talk about, so you've got, you're close to 50 years of this business. You're bringing in your son. This is a generational business at this point. Where do the next 10 years look like for you? Are you at a place where I'm good, or we still got growth in us and this is where we're going?
So I don't have any intention of ever being done. Right now, will I spend my time a little bit differently? My son and I and the rest of this group enjoy each other's company so much that we always say that we're just going to work until somebody kicks us out the door. But so my next 10 years is really focused on some major changes that we made starting about 12 months ago. And so they have this time frame associated with them. And so one of the big ones is that we moved our corporate office that we had been in for 40 years. We moved it from Maitland, Florida, which is just outside of Orlando, to a small little town called Winter Garden, Florida, which is just outside of Orlando. The difference in that, by the way, real quick, was the old office, which was 5 minutes from my brother's house. And the new office is 10 minutes from my son and myself. So that wasn't the primary reason, but it certainly was definitely a great motivator. Yeah. We did relocate it because of strategically we could move a little bit more around the state a little bit easier in the location we are now. Now, what that meant is that we didn't have time to build a new office. But I do have a development project, a big office, 40,000 square foot office, 60,000 square foot warehouse project that I just began working on in the last month. That will be the new home of WPC.
Wow.
Potentially for the next 50 years. Wow. And so it is a 5-year project, given all the things that it takes to put a project like that together. And so at least for the next 5 years, I'll have that piece of my attention. And then the development projects are with one of my partners. We have a company called WPC Ventures that develops multifamily projects, which is a wonderful business to be in, probably for quite some time. So I focus more of my attention on some of the other aspects of our business. I focus still on the storytelling, and I love that part of the business, and I'm teaching my son how to do that, although he's quite good at it already. And then my job is to make sure that every person in this company on a day-to-day basis is doing okay. And so I don't go ask Ken, sitting right over here, how his job is. I ask Ken, how he is. And so, because I want to know that Ken's in good shape, because if he's in good shape mentally or whatever the situation is, then he's going to perform well and he's going to give my clients a good experience and his clients a good experience. So my job is really making sure that the 85 people in this company are in really good shape and feeling good. And then by that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
Well,
85 people.
I love going back to what you said, where you said part of your job is the storytelling, right? The fact that you're intentional about, because some of that stuff gets lost, right? And maybe it does and maybe it doesn't, but especially for a company that's been around as long as you guys have and has a vision of being around, just as long into the future, if not longer, those stories are important to the culture and how how you guys got to where you are. So the intentionality behind, that storytelling, not only to your clients and everybody else, but inside your business, I think is awesome. You don't hear that too often, that people are actually,
it's very special,
intentional about making sure that those stories are live on forever.
Yeah.
I think that, and I appreciate you recognizing. I think the thing that's important about any company, by the way, and certainly in our business as general contractors, you need both head people and heart people. And so the idea that we have, and I mean this wholeheartedly, I'm one of the 85, so there's 84 people in this company that have a different skill set that I do and will do lots of things better. And so but lots of them are head people. And so we have to remind them that there is a heart to this experience that we're providing. And so all this stuff that you kind of hear me talk about and the things that kind of connect the dots and all this really is about the fact that, quite honestly, there's not one person asked me how to build something, how much it costs, or how long it takes. Not one. Definitely not how much it costs or how to estimate it. We still had block in our warehouse from an estimate that I did in 1982. Just happened to take that dyslexia a little bit too far and moved a couple of things. But I say that because my job isn't to build stuff. It is to run a good business, make sure that we're looking forward at the things, but it is to kind of bring heart to this thing. And if I can translate that in the next 10, 15 years or however long I stick around, that's what I want to do. I want to move this thought of how we want to be as humans to enough people so that it carries on.
Oh, so sweet. So good.
Awesome.
So good. So different. So different than what so many of us are doing in our industry. You are leading with your heart, but producing some pretty magical experiences by doing it. I'm not in the business of building, is what you said. You're in the business of creating experiences.
That's just the medium, right? I feel like you could almost be running any type of business. The fact that it's a construction business is probably because it was, like you said, generationally in your blood and what you knew from a family aspect. But I almost feel like you could be running any business, and as long as you run it the same way you are running it now, it would probably be successful.
Wow.
Yeah, really, and it depends on how you measure success, right? And so my metric of success isn't
you got a job after 50 years, and you've created sustainability for 85 other people. That's success, right? Whether financially there or not.
Period.
Yeah. And so I'll keep working on it and see how good I'll get by the time they ask me to walk out the door, or the sun sets, or whatever the right words are to do it. And,
how close is your son to getting to that point of kind of being in that leadership role? You said that there's people right now that kind of look at him as a leader, right? Kind of like they did for you, even when your brother was still there. But how does he have that same mentality you had, that he's still kind of got that safety net? He's not comfortable being the person there because you're still there. What's his mentality like? What's his timeline look like, and where's he at in that development?
Yeah, so he is currently our director of business development, but he sits on our executive board and leads that group with one other young executive named Sam Miller. And Sam and Jeffrey, coincidentally, we're in November, right? So this month they sign their partnership papers, and they will own together 55% of this company. And so they are the future leaders, and people here not only have seen it, but they accept it. And so to be more specific, Mike, when we walk into an executive meeting, it's Jeffrey's meeting to run, right? And he's got such a great support group that I think that he won't necessarily look at me as the safety net that I did with my brother, because he will always have this tight-knit group of similar generational from an age standpoint, and have kind of all drank the Kool-Aid together, probably mixed the Kool-Aid together at the same time. And so it really is an interesting dynamic of the way this company is led compared to where it was certainly with my brother as the sole proprietor, and then myself, who my model was my brother, so I tend to have the same conditions associated with it. But I think this group will be different, and I know it already is. So he doesn't know everything, right? I'm still sharing the wisdom, but he certainly has the ability to sit in a situation, any situation, and be able to lead that conversation. Yeah, so awesome. It's super cool. It's one of my favorite things about waking up every day.
Yeah, so I've done close to 200 of these. Maricelo's been around for, I think, 15 or 20 of them now. But I know, talking to, especially in the family aspect, right, when it moves from one generation to the next, and it sounds like a lot of times that happens pretty abruptly, right? There's a father and a son. The father wants out pretty quickly. The son's coming in, or the son comes in pretty quickly, with a pretty fast trajectory, and ends up taking over. And I say father and son, but it could be, daughters, moms, whatever. But there's usually something that happens, or some sort of
the triggers,
big change in the business when those things happen, right? There's a vision, that's a difference in vision. There's a difference in philosophy, something that changes when it kind of moves from one generation to the next. It sounds like you guys are a little bit slower and more methodical about that, which I'm not going to say is good, bad, or indifferent, but I guess the core of my question is there something that your son and that group are doing, have done, will do, kind of in that transition process that is maybe a big change to how you guys do it now, whether it be from marketing or business development, or what you guys do from a type of scope of work standpoint, or any of those type of things at all?
Yeah, I think that one of the advantages this group has that I didn't have is that I didn't have this core group of clients that really provide about 75% of our business, and so the sales process, or the part by where we have to go acquire new work, is not as difficult. Now, that may not last, so knock on wood, we are where we are. So that this group manages their thought process is far more methodical than mine was. I did take a little bit more risk. My brother and I took a little bit more risk than perhaps this group might, at least initially. That might be generational as well as time goes by. But when I say they're more methodical, they initiated a year ago what we now call OKRs, which is objectives and key results. It's a wonderful process that I knew nothing about. And they have these 5 OKRs going on at all times. And the difference is, compared to the way that I led and managed, at least until recently, was that in that group of people, in each one of those lists, that they have an objective, right? And let's say the objective is that we're going to do a subcontractor outreach, and we're going to develop different relationships. They bring in, there's 2 executives from the executive group. and 4 people from everywhere in the company. And that group sits down and they speak to how they're going to accomplish this objective. And then you measure the results, right? And so I never had any of that stuff. It was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Let's develop a plan and go do it. And let's not include anybody else. Let's just go. Let's grab a few people. We'll make it happen. This group is very methodical about organizing the various objectives in order to accomplish the ultimate goal, which is to provide an experience. Right. And a year ago, they tore down this sign that we had in our old office that said, "One purpose, serve our clients." They took the sign down. And of course, I knew it was going to happen, but I kind of felt like, okay, so now what are you going to do? They go, you know what our purpose is? To serve each other. And if we serve each other well, and they do that really well, then all the other stuff happens.
So good.
So the young group changed the core values and purpose of this company. They started to look at ways of, and I think that's a difference generationally in how this younger group wants to be led, right? They want to know not what is in it for them, but do you care about them on a day-to-day basis? So and if you can accomplish that. And so, I'd like to think that I add value there. And I do, because I love talking to everybody, but the intentional process by which this younger executive group works is super cool to watch.
That's
Sounds
awesome.
super cool. I
love that. Sounds like you guys, it's a fun place to be. It sounds like you guys are like I said, a fun place to head into every day. So
Jeff, it sounds like an experience.
Yeah,
sounds like
an experience. 100%.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Mission accomplished.
Before we kind of, as we get close to wrapping this up, Maricela's favorite part of this whole thing, and the only part we script, is she's got 4 questions for you. We call our lightning round or fast hands or whatever you want to call it. But she's got 4 questions that she wants to ask you.
Yeah. I ask every guest that we get to talk to the same 4 questions, again, because the intent of this podcast is not only to, create a voice and a face to, all the people that do what we do, but to be a resource for other people listening. I appreciate podcasts that I walk away from being like, oh, I didn't think about that, or I want to go try that, or that's a new something that I want to do, and it makes me better for spending the 50 minutes or so listening to the podcast. So it's the same 4 questions that I ask every single guest that we get to talk to. The first question is, what is one resource, Jeff, that your business cannot do without? What's one resource that your business cannot do without?
We cannot do without. I'm going to give him a little. This is a resource, by the way, that's fairly new. The guy's name is Fred Guiton. He's one of my dearest friends now over the 10 years. And Fred and I never spent time together talking about business. We always spent time together talking about charities and football and sports. But this resource, and I say this and so as a consultant, finding somebody that you can trust that will be honest with you. And so this resource that we have in Fred, by the way, he now mentors and coaches all of our young executives in this company. And I couldn't live without him. He changed the way we think.
So it's a consultant that's come into your business, spoken into your life and into the lives of your executives. So if it's a consultant or like a coach of some sort.
A coach, a mentor, that's exactly right. You have to have somebody with a perspective that's going to come in and challenge your thought process. Yeah. And you can't be afraid of that, and they can't be afraid to do it.
Yeah.
So that person or people or whatever is it.
Yeah. Good one. Good
Sounds
one.
like, did you know this guy before you brought him in to be this consultant for you?
So, ask the question more time.
Did you know him before you brought him in?
I knew him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what was
Fred and I sit on a board.
What was the change where you said, "Hey, rather than just being a friend, like we want you to take this official mentor role"? What was the
August of last year, I called Fred and asked him to have some coffee because I had a question and just needed to bounce something off a good friend, and I'd known Fred for 10 years. I had coffee with him that started at 8 a.m. and lasted until 1 p.m. And he not only did he give me the time, but I was telling him all this stuff, and he goes, that's not what you need to think about. This is what you need to think about. Have you asked this question of yourself? And so the way that this kind of evolved. Now, by the way, Fred has a full-time job with a whole nother company as a top executive in that company. But what he did was he was willing to invest time with me personally and with all these executives, still does it to this day.
Love that.
And he hates when I give him credit, because he said, all I did was ask you a bunch of questions. I go, yeah, it was more than that.
Yeah, but that wasn't a question I was asking. And I echo that, Jeff. I think there's so much power in having another set of eyes that's completely unbiased, that's speaking into your business. I have had the same business coach for many years now, and it's changed my business in the most positive of ways. And I
love that you found it in a friend and were humble enough to ask him to come aboard and help out, rather than seeking out maybe somebody who's quote unquote a professional mentor or a professional coach, or does that for a living specifically. Not that that's any different or bad, but the fact that you found that in somebody else who wasn't necessarily advertising that or pushing that. And then again, like I said, we're humble enough to bring that person on board, I think is awesome, and probably creates a pretty special relationship between all you guys, I assume.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Second question, what's the best advice someone's given you?
The best advice somebody gave me, and by the way, it wasn't that long ago, and I wish I would have heeded this advice when I was in my 30s, is that you just should not worry so much about everything, right? I mean, I was in my younger days very much a worrier, and it came from a lot of different directions. And by the way, that's different than anxiety. But the reality is you just don't have to worry. Don't worry so much. Just work the problem. And so that was the advice that I not only utilize and communicate on a regular basis. I really take it to heart, because worrying only gets you so far. Then you got to stop and then work the problem.
I was going to say, either way, it doesn't solve the problem, right? Yeah.
It doesn't solve the problem.
Shorten that window a little bit, and then go to work.
Yeah.
Love that.
Dig that. Third question. I feel like I might know the answer to this because you mentioned it earlier. I was going to say, I almost stopped him because of this specifically, but we can run it back. We can run it back. Book or podcast that you love and recommend?
Yeah. So if you want to know, my favorite book is The Alchemist, and maybe that's the favorite book of lots of people.
An amazing book.
That's
an amazing.
By the way, I buy that every time I see it hardcover. I buy it, and then I'm always giving it away. But that's my favorite book for lots of reasons. And I know
Isn't there a movie about The Alchemist supposed to, like, in production? I feel like I heard there was they were trying to make it into a movie, but an incredible book.
I hope they don't. I don't. If they are, I probably won't watch it because I'm such a fan, and not only of the book, but that author has a series of books, by the way, that are wonderful.
Yep.
And of course, the books that I mentioned, by the way, Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last. And if I had to pick one, it would be Leaders Eat Last, because it really does change the way that you will think about leading your people in any business. To Mike's point, it's into any business.
Cool.
Awesome.
Last question. What is one habit that you have for yourself to pour into yourself so that you can then pour into others?
Yeah, I will say the habit that I have created, and I created this from my best friend on the planet. I wake up every day and I get to do everything that I do. He says it was really the thought process. I don't have to do anything. I get to do it. And so when I wake up first thing in the morning, I think about what I get to do. And it really is. I wake up and I go, what do I get to do today?
Yeah.
And just that little thought process changes the way I'm going to approach the problem. And so it's more of a mental thing than anything else.
Love it. Love it. Jeff, you are
awesome.
Just a person of heart. Like you think with your heart, you lead with your heart. Like it's really, really special. I could feel that. I mean, we're in an entire country between us and there's a screen between us, but I could absolutely feel the pulse of your leadership and your vision. It's really, really special.
Well, and
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What I love about this episode is so often we talk about the tactical pieces of your business. Like, how did you solve problems? How did you do this? How do you hire? How do you market? How do you do it? Which are all great, right? And I realized about 45 minutes into this that we hadn't gotten to a lot of that. But there's so much good content and so much depth to what you do and how you do it that I almost didn't want to and I don't want to. And maybe that's another podcast and we can talk about that later. But there's so much more, and I think benefit hearing how you guys operate in around that mentality of an experience for everybody. And like she said, the heart that you operate your business with. I think this was a phenomenal episode, even though we didn't get to a lot of the tactical stuff. But
yeah, Mike, I don't know if this is like the least I've spoken.
Yeah,
like I just shut up and let you talk because it was like hypnotizing. Usually
we have to tell Maricela to slow down a little bit, but yeah.
It was
well, I had good coffee this morning. And by the way, I had good coffee in my best grandpa ever mug, because there are 3 Jeffs in this family now, myself, my son, and my grandson, Jeff, who will more than likely, because it's in his DNA, run this company one day. So that'll be awesome. So
congratulations.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys very much. Thanks for,
Thank you.
I mentioned it, Michael, thanks for the patience and thanks for the questions, and my apologies if I talk too much.
No, never. These are so much better.
So much value.
So
much value.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sure anyone
there's a lot more stories. There's a lot.
I was going to
say
of
stories we didn't get to.
There's I bring usually people on round 2 about a year and a half later, but you are going to be first on my list for round 2 in the near future.
Yeah. There's definitely a round 2 in this one.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's a compliment. And so thank you guys.
Before we go, let people know where to find you guys, how to get a hold of you guys. Look for, find your stuff if you guys are out there at all.
Yeah. So I'll tell you that. So WPC.com is our URL, our website. And by the way, we get to be the first company within the United States to have a URL, first construction company to have a website. And back in the late 80s and 90s, my brother captured WPC.com. And
the
so
nuggets just never end. They just never end with this episode.
The nuggets never end. That's right. That's right.
I love that.
So that's really where to go find us. And, we try to, our social media is located on that website. And you can kind of see all the fun stuff that this company does. And I would imagine that most of what you'll see in our social media is probably an event that we had last weekend or somebody's birthday or whatever it is. And then all the projects that you have to show, because that's what you do.
Because you have to. Yep. Awesome.
I will definitely be following along, Jeff.
Yeah. Thanks again, man. We appreciate it. Keep in touch. Stay safe out there, and we'll be in touch soon.
Enjoy that weather that you guys go in. Just try to. Hopefully, your husband will learn how to drive in it soon enough.
Soon enough.
We'll be thinking of your warm weather. Thanks, Jeff.
Right on. Thank you. I'll see you.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you had a good time, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get all the latest episodes. And if you had a really good time, leave a review to let us know what you thought. Until then, go gather some crazy stories on your job sites, and we'll see you next time on So, You Want to Be a Contractor.